our next presentation, that's going to be by Amy Wicks, and I do believe we have a video.
We have a brief video that's
Yes.
incredible, which Amy is featured in, and then we're going to bring up the live Amy to present to us and to talk with you about some of the different things that help communities become better prepared for future flooding. So with that, we're going to try to go into the video.
Yeah.
You want to do the purpose? I'm sorry.
Sure, yeah, no problem. So the purpose of this is to brief the committee on insights that came from the design and engineering of the Babcock Ranch community, which include lessons learned, challenges, successes, and recommendations to other communities wishing to reduce or prevent flooding. This relates to public engagement new activity 3.2, bring partners together, provide resources, and coordinate natural disaster and episodic events response and recovery efforts. We'll jump into the video.
Let's hope it works.
Of the 15 most damaging hurricanes in U.S. history, only 2 were Category 5.
Hurricane categories are based on wind speeds and only wind speeds.
But what often creates the most damage is water.
Given all of the new codes, most homes can really survive Category 5 winds. However, they can also float away fully intact.
Yet, this one town, Babcock Ranch, has been hit by 4 hurricanes and basically came out unscathed.
There was no flooding at all.
So, we asked the engineer who helped build this town to break down its hidden designs. Here's Babcock Ranch from above, with Fort Myers and Cape Coral nearby. For a lot of the surrounding areas,
everything is developed very grid-like, which is traditional because it utilizes the land the best.
But this type of development doesn't always consider how nearby wetlands expand and absorb excess floodwater.
You do have a waterway that flows right through here. These areas that used to act as a sponge are kind of all taken up by development. And so these areas are very prone to flooding.
Babcock Ranch took a different approach. These photos show part of the ranch before and after it was developed. All the dark patches are wetlands, and you can see how the ranch was built around them, leaving some areas where they'll flood and connect untouched.
It was very important to us to utilize the existing water systems.
But it didn't just leave these systems intact. Babcock Ranch also mimicked them. To do this, they turned the ponds and lakes into a network of bowls.
So the way the entire system is designed is each of these lakes acts like a very bottom of a bowl, and the rest of the system is built up around the edges of the bowl, and it sits a little bit higher. So you have the houses at the highest point, and the houses, the water falls off of it and it goes down into the bowl.
Each bowl is connected through a series of pipes underground. That way, if one lake fills up, it won't spill over. It'll just drain to a different bowl with more capacity. Then, if there's a blockage, all these extra pipes help ensure the water keeps flowing. And Babcock's system lets them control the water levels, allowing them to drain the bowls before hurricanes to accommodate the extra water, which is eventually discharged down to the river.
There is a ditch that runs right through the middle of the property and all the way out to the river here. Traditional design would say to move the water through that ditch as fast as possible. What we've done at Babcock is we've allowed that water to come out to the fringes of the development and fill in this entire area.
Slowing the water down lets the wetlands absorb some of the water, preventing an onslaught of stormwater from inundating the river and surrounding areas. The next key to managing hurricane flooding is elevation. Babcock Ranch's natural elevation ranged from 12 to 38 feet.
So generally anything that falls within the development footprint overall was elevated.
But certain areas of the town were elevated higher than others, directing water towards specific collection points.
The smaller roads were elevated by about 3.5 feet. The larger roads were elevated by approximately 4.5 feet. And then any of the homes were elevated by about 5 feet.
Now, the majority of the community is at or above 30 feet. In a 100-year storm event, the ranch would face about 14 inches of rainfall, and the water levels would rise by about 4 feet. And all of the homes on Babcock would be 1 foot above the water level. Its grocery store and some offices, 2 feet above it.
So if things were to be catastrophic, we want to be able to bounce back as quick as possible. So being able to go get your groceries, being able to go to work, those types of things need to be the first accessible places.
But while all the buildings would be safe, the roads would be completely flooded by design.
At a certain point, they're going to go underwater because they were what was built the lowest. We can intentionally use those roads to help direct the flow to allow the water to connect between the lake and the roads away from the homes and the structures.
But much of the ranch's success also lies in its location. It's about 20 miles inland from Florida's west coast. And that distance alone is enough to mostly protect it from the deadliest force in a hurricane, storm surge. As hurricanes move inland, they push a huge volume of water ashore at high speeds and with immense force.
It's going to pull the water from the Gulf and push it all the way inland this way.
Take Hurricane Helene.
Hurricane Helene kind of took the path here and made landfall around the Keaton Beach, Tallahatchie area, where 80% of the buildings were completely destroyed from storm surge being 12 to 16 feet overall.
But as a storm moves inland,
so a 9-foot storm surge on the beach, for example, would get up to the rafters in the house. What you'll see is a 9-foot storm surge here is only a 3-foot storm surge here.
Florida's coastline is lined with mangroves that act as a natural buffer, slowing down the storm surge and trapping debris.
Anything that's creating friction for that water is going to also help slow that water down.
But far away from the dangers of the coast, rainfall still poses a significant threat. About 25% of hurricane deaths in the U.S. occurred in inland counties.
As we've seen more and more storms that are exceeding 100-year events across the United States, it appears more and more likely that designing to a 100-year storm event is not going to be enough to keep a home from flooding over the course of its built life.
There's a 1% chance every year that a 100-year storm event will happen. And since Amy started working on this project,
we've seen 3 100-year storm events.
Hurricanes have cumulatively caused over 7,000 deaths and cost $1.5 trillion in damages since 1980. And Florida is one of the most vulnerable places in the country. So while the current laws mandate many homes be built to withstand a 100-year event, some developers are building beyond the requirement. Just look at Hunters Point, a new coastal development. It was required to build at an elevation of 10 feet above the flood zone, but instead it was built 16 feet above it. So during Hurricane Helene, the streets flooded, but the homes remained dry. Each one that sold has gone for upwards of $1 million.
There is a larger push from people who have experienced flooding situations to purchase those types of homes. I think ultimately we can prevent the amount of destruction that we've been seeing with hurricanes. People are going to want to move to Florida no matter what. We're prepared to be more resilient and move on quicker. And that's a big part of making sure that we're developing responsibly if we are going to develop an area that is subject to such extreme events.
Wow, that's from the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah.
So.
It was fun.
Pretty
video,
cool. Yeah.
Can I control it up here?
Yes. Well,
No.
actually,
But I
no.
can give you- That's fine.
Sorry. We
I'll
had to.
stand up here. Is that okay? Yeah. I can sit over here.
No. Stand up there, but just tell us when to move the slide.
Can I see it up here?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Fine. So I probably will stand here just so I can see it, so I'm not looking behind me the whole time. So I know, so that was 5 hours of filming and about 40 hours of interview that went into that. So it is a much more complex, big living system than what you heard that was tried to get distilled down for common consumption. A lot of you are going to be like, I already understand all of the basic stuff. That was way too rudimentary. I don't think you're doing anything. There's little tidbits hidden in it, in the little extras, but really, especially if you have a lot of knowledge about permitting in South Florida and everything, it seems very traditional because a lot of that got kind of distilled out. So I'm going to try to talk a little bit about those things, but I want to make sure I give you enough time to ask questions because this is something that personally, I'm very passionate about. I think we're going to develop anyway, just like I said. So let's start doing things that make a lot more sense to make it a little bit safer, since we're going to be doing it anyway. We can't just stop development. It's not going to happen, especially in Florida. So let's try to be considerate more of the future instead of the past, so we can be more resilient, even as it comes to recovery and things like that. Next slide. So the challenge is really, this is repetitive losses. It's not just a coastal concern, and even those areas on the coast are not just storm surge. Those are also rain-driven summer storm surge. You're getting a lot that's happening because of the tide increases too. So what we've designed as engineers, because we thought we were geniuses way back in the day and we had all of this data that we could use, so we're going to assume what tailwaters are going to be. Well, they're not now. So now we have to figure out, well, what do you do? And that's creating a lot of the repetitive losses as well. It's not just that the tide is higher, it's that the waters can't get out as fast, which is causing the flooding as well. Next slide. And then hurricanes. So this is very specific to this area. This is just since 2000, I believe, when I pulled up this graphic. This was right before Helene that this actual image was produced. But you can see the Gulf Coast is much more a target now than it was previously. I mean, so many people, and you hear all the time. I remember I moved in 2004, right before Charlie, like weeks before Charlie. And I was working at the city of Fort Myers, and someone was like, what are you doing for the hurricanes? And I was like, you prepared for these things? Like, I'm used to Tornado Alley, like I'm from Indiana, like I don't know what you're supposed to do. And then everybody else was like, don't worry about it. They always say they're gonna hit. There hasn't been a hurricane here since 1960. Cool, well, that's not where we live now. So it's much more severe. And so there's two things that we really need to make sure we're considering. And as engineers, again, engineers have a tendency to think they're super smart. We thought we had it figured out. Hurricanes don't come here, so we don't need to design for them. So what type of impacts are we getting from hurricanes that we can actually design for? As a civil engineer doing stormwater infrastructure, I'm not going to design the building to be stronger. That's not what I do. And I do design for a lot of rainfall, but what's different about a hurricane than regular rainfall that I need to go ahead and consider? Well, debris is the big one. We're going to have a lot of debris. Debris is going to block inlets. What do we need to do to make sure that we can keep everything open? There's a lot of different factors like that that we've just ignored for years as engineers because we thought we could redesign systems to be better than nature. And it's just not that way. We've been proven wrong. So next slide. I ordered these slightly incorrectly. So I want you to first kind of look at the downtown Fort Myers here on the left, and then the far one over for Lake Babcock Drive there. And I just wanted to point out the vast difference. These are both through the town centers. This is taken at a different angle. You can see the Babcock Town Center there, but I wanted you to be able to see something different here. I can tell you, if you've been to downtown Fort Myers, there's not a spot in downtown Fort Myers that looks like that. The difference here is this whole area right here, that green area, the green area right there, all of those green areas, they're landscaped areas, but they are sunken areas intentionally so that if the road starts to back up, if the rainfalls get too intense, the road will convey the water past the inlets to little pinch points that will get the water into these, which then also have additional drains in them. That also works in a hurricane. If debris blocks the inlet and it can't get out, instead of building up in the road like you would normally get and eventually gets into buildings, it's going to bypass the whole system and go hit these green areas that we've done. I walk past this every day. I run every morning, run right past it. I walk past it on my way to work every day. I forget that it's there unless we have a really big rainfall event, and I walk home right afterwards and I can hear it running, and then I'm like, oh yeah, we put it there. It's working. That's what I wanted it to do. But otherwise, it just looks like a really pretty landscape area when you're walking past it. It's got really grass in it. It's all pretty colors. It has some trees in it. You don't even notice that they're there. And we do those throughout the entire community. Again, here's two different ones. You can see we tried to make Babcock look as normal as possible. It looks just like this if you don't know what you're looking at it. Like, yeah, it's a traditional development. But we did the exact same thing right here. We have the roads conveying the water. If they get stuck and backed up to that actual overflow right there. We've done it with everything in Babcock, honestly. We have sports fields that we intentionally sunk, and if things start to back up, it floods the sports fields. I will tell you, after Hurricane Ian, no one came and complained to me when the soccer field wasn't playable for 2 days. Not a single person was like, well, the soccer field flooded. Wasn't a thing. Everybody was like, I drove like to the gas station and it's gone. That's a problem. So thanks for making us safe. That was it. No one cared that the soccer field was flooded. Not a single person, and it did. And it recovered in a day, and it was fine. We're working right now on an amphitheater for a new portion of the park. Amphitheater is going to do the same thing. We're going to redirect everything to the amphitheater. The amphitheater will temporarily hold water if things start to back up. And that's just, we don't know what's going to happen. Are we going to get 8 inches in an hour? It could happen. It could absolutely happen. None of the inlets are designed to take an 8-inch an hour storm event. That's just not something we designed for. What happens if we have a hurricane and they get blocked with a lot of debris? We've combated some of that with the native vegetation. We don't have as much debris as we thought. But those types of things are all things that we're considering. And how do we convey the water to those locations, and what do we do to make sure that we can get it out of the system as quickly as possible so the system continues to function as we wanted it to. Next slide. So just a general overview of Babcock Ranch. You're all from the area, so I think you overall know most of it. We did preserve the greenways as much as possible. I think really that's the big thing. We wanted to utilize those greenways. That allows us to expand. We do have weirs in there to hold that water back in those greenways even more, so it's not discharging too fast. We've actually been very pleasantly surprised by these folks down here, because this area is almost entirely developed already. About half of their area. Where you can see all the little lakes is where the development's complete. But this area right here is actually seeing less water, and I haven't seen a flood situation since Babcock has started redirecting water and kind of holding it back, making sure that everything gets filled up and everything. So we've been very pleasantly surprised. They're happy, but it's not like we're holding back too much water. They're very happy with the amount of water they're getting. They think they have a farm down there. They think they're getting enough water, but they haven't had any flooding situations since then. So we're managing the water better. It's going back to where it was originally. Next slide. So just guiding principles, I would say we generally have 3 guiding principles. The first one is integration with nature. That was very important. I have an ecological engineering degree. I have a civil engineering degree also, but an ecological engineering degree. And that was very systems-based approach, and that's kind of how we approached everything at Babcock, was systems-based, where you draw out your little figures and what are all of your inputs, what are all of your outputs. And so we had more inputs once we added people than what was already out there, but we tried to keep the outputs the same. And in a lot of situations, what we even did is removed some of those impacts that were there previously to try to hold back water the way it was naturally. We tried to mimic more what was there naturally, because if you go through and you look at those repetitive loss locations, what you see in those repetitive loss locations is typically it's where water used to go. And then we were like, oh, we can move water because we're engineers and we're great. And it didn't work that way. The nature ended up fighting back, and now that's where we have repetitive losses. So what we've done is try to make sure when we build around it, we can go ahead and still utilize what exists, but then internal to what we're building, and most of the construction is on farm fields and everything else. Upland areas, we've tried to mimic what was there all the way back in the 1940s. We pulled aerials from the 1940s. So this is just internal to the site where we just store water in open green space as it would have naturally, if it continued to function as the farm fields and stuff that will get water on, and it will stand there. Next. So the next one we have is we do have smart ponds, which makes it really interesting and kind of fun. So our overall system is a full regional interconnected system. When we do a development that has 3 lakes in it, yes, the 3 lakes are connected. However, it's also connected directly to 7 other. You don't do the typical control structure for that 3-lake unit, whatever development it is. They all share. We do have a few different basins. I think overall we have 42 control structures. But all of those lakes can then talk to each other. So the first full developed basin that we have presently has 46 different lakes, 2 control structures, one out each side, one, because it spans 2 watersheds, so 2 control structures in it. But what we can do is monitor that, and then those can all talk to each other. So we know if it gets a little bit higher over here, and it's not quite over here, we can actually then use the structures that we have internally to send water in a different direction, because we do have this big regional unit. None of that goes off-site, and we send it internal between site. And that's just because we do have a regional system, so we're able to regionally manage that. It's been very helpful to help prepare, because you'll have 5 inches over here, and we'll literally have an inch of rain over here. So we're able to kind of move that water around internally to kind of hold everything. It's also kind of benefited the wetlands. So we've seen a large improvement in the wetlands because you don't have as much variability anymore. So our hydro periods are getting more normal. It's kind of helped keeping some of the exotic out too. We're not having to manage the exotics as much as we used to. So that's kind of how they're connected. And then this right here, we have a dashboard that we can see everything when it rains. Down the bottom, you can see the rainfall on the top. If you look really close, that green line just pops up just a little bit. That's our actual lake elevations there, so we can monitor that live in real time. We'll get a notification. It runs the NOAA forecast off of all of our water models every 15 minutes. So if it sees now that we're gonna get a 10-inch rainfall event, I'll get an alert on my phone that is like, do you want to send some water over here? It's a little bit low over in this area, and you're supposed to get 10 inches right here. Do you want to start moving some water to make a little bit more capacity in your system? That notice, so it runs off of 7 days. So we usually have a 7-day notice is what it's running. So we get about 7 days to be able to move water. We stop moving water 3 days before the actual event, but we make decisions ahead of that. Next. And the last one is really just our guiding principles. This kind of goes into kind of the roads like we already talked about, and then also, as you saw on the video there, we don't necessarily want to flood proof. It's got to be flood friendly. I can't predict what's going to happen in 20 years. We heard Carolina. If we're going to continue to increase by 20%, these homes aren't built high enough. But if some of these homes are going to flood, and that does happen, how can we make sure that everybody recovers faster? And so that's something we talked about a little bit on the video as well. So I won't cover it as much, but the commercial areas are intentionally even higher. The roads drain out a little bit quicker and are higher to try to make everything accessible so people can get back to work. Because the last thing you want when your home is also damaged is to not be getting paid. So we want people to be able to get out to work. We want them to get to Publix, because if the electricity is out for whatever, if their house floods, you have to turn off the electricity until you get everything dried out. If they don't have electricity to their house, the refrigerator isn't working, so they have to go to Publix every day. So Publix, for example, is higher. We want to make sure Publix can open. All of the roads from State Road 31 to Publix are also higher. Their parking lot's higher to make sure Publix itself is very accessible, to make sure that everybody can get their needs and everything after and shrink that. Next. System performance, it's changed over time. So our first hurricane was Irma. The only thing open, we had 5 commercial buildings open, no residents on site yet. That was a good first test. So we changed a few things in how we managed water. Put in some more redundancy into the system. We didn't have too much of a problem. We had a little bit of road flooding. State Road 31 flooded pretty badly. And so we came up with some bypass systems to take some of the water off of State Road 31 into the community in an extreme event, to try to make the road safer in case residents needed to get out. We worked with FP&L to make a redundant system so we could keep power. And come Hurricane Ian, we had no idea if any of the changes that we made were going to work, and there were a bunch more houses. So it's a little bit scary. But we didn't lose power during Hurricane Ian at all. And the systems held up, like I said earlier. I was shocked how little debris we actually had in the inlets, because we have had a problem with debris in the inlets in other storm events.
just intense rainfall. And that has led us to change what we use in the verges. So you're no longer allowed to use mulch or pine straw in the verges because they did cause some flooding and everything. So those are getting switched up to grass or ground cover. But really, we had 10.4 inches of rain during Ian, and the local roads are designed for about 7 inches. And we had no water standing in the roads at any point at all. Everything handled the rainfall very well and it functioned very well. We did no bleed down ahead of that event either, so that was at normal control. Now at Milton, we did see the water back up into the roads a little bit. It was a lesser storm event. This one was about 9 inches. The difference was everything was super saturated already. We were already above control because of Helene by about a half a foot. So we didn't have any freeboard at all in the system. Again, at that point, we didn't operate the controls or anything ahead of time. We just let it run. And we had minor street flooding. This is actually me driving around during Milton. So little minor street flooding. I mean, that's at an inlet, so it's not super substantial or anything, but that's how it performed, and it was gone by the time anybody else left their homes. So next slide. Overall, I think the strategy that we implemented is everybody has to work together from the get-go. As an engineer, if I'm going to design somewhere to store the water, or at least back when I started working on this 18 years ago, it's probably just going to look like a really boring dry detention area, and that's not really good for sales. And same thing kind of with the transportation networks. They don't necessarily want you to be like, well, I don't want you to convey water down my road. And so it was a very collaborative effort between landscape architects and engineers. It was very important that everybody was working together to be like, this is how we're going to do it to make it function. Data-informed design, I think that includes making sure that we're looking into the future, not just what the past data was, because really engineering has been set up with a bunch of, these are the ways it's always been done and the ways that it should be done. So using the data from new storm events, what we're seeing now and everything, kind of considering that. Even we talked about Fort Lauderdale earlier with the example of Fort Lauderdale. I think we need to expect that maybe that will happen, and at least we need to understand if it does happen, what's going to happen and how do we recover quicker. And so that's something we regularly talk about. And then the technical eloquence through collaboration, and that just has to do with, I mean, when I started modeling this, we could do a 1D model. If you started talking 2D, people were thinking groundwater integration. We were not talking about doing two-dimensional. Now, not only can we do that, but we can get AI to update storm events based on how they interact with our piezometers and everything else. So this is constantly evolving and changing. And I think an important component that we need to make sure we're including is, as we continue to do this, we're getting so much data so fast, we need to be able to keep adapting to those changes in technology as well as data. And I think that's it. Next one. Oh, it's not. This is the last one, though. So this was just the challenges faced and everything, because I figured it was a question that you guys would ask. Navigating regulations hasn't been super difficult, but I have gotten so many questions like, well, you're just doing a 200 unit development, like, why don't you just put a control structure in and do it separately? Like, well, because they don't have to and it works better this way. Yeah, but it's much harder to understand if you connect it with 46 other lakes. So it takes longer to be able to permit it. It really does, because getting the agencies to understand what you're doing, it's just so different. It's been a challenge. Building trust. I think it's getting better. We still have a lot of people that don't believe what we've done is A, any different, or B, that we're not doing it solely for ourselves. Because there's things that we'll do. For example, when we discharge ahead of an event, if we know a large event is coming and we do discharge, we then will hold everything during the event so it's not discharging when we're getting 10 inches of rainfall. And it's better for the people downstream because now we know we have, and they're like, well, why would you do that? Why not?
Like, it's going to be better for them too. And so developing that trust has been a little bit difficult. Fortunately, the people immediately downstream of us do have that trust with us, but the agencies don't always. Balancing costs, it does cost more to do that upfront. It costs a lot less after a hurricane. And so we've seen definitely more people be willing to do it who are going to be in an area long term. And not as many who you have your regular builders that go in, build, and they're out in 2 or 3 years once they've sold all the homes. They're not as willing to even listen. And that's where it's nice for agencies and municipalities can come in and help with that. They're around for the long haul too. So I would like to see more changes to kind of move things and ordinances overall that direction, just because it is difficult, I think, trying to get the builders who are trying to make maximum profit to implement some of these things, because they do cost a little bit more. And then living strategies, that's just going back into, it's gotta change all the time. Like, we're constantly on our toes, and also paying attention to the new technologies. So even from the time we started, we've seen the rainfall intensities increase. So we had to change, for example, our inlet types on new roads. We have old ones that have smaller inlets, and we've just decided that doesn't work for us anymore. We're not changing them out, but we are growing with what is changing pretty much as quickly as it's changing. So it's just kind of being on our toes and making sure that we're revisiting that like annually. So we do every year. In May, we do an annual review as we get ready for the next storm season to kind of be like, what can we do better? So that's a really important component, and something that we've learned over time too. And that's all, I promise. I tried to talk fast, hit on everything so you can ask questions, so.
So I think, and I appreciate you talking about this. I'm being in Charlotte County, obviously, so I'm familiar with Babcock Ranch development, and there's been a lot of internal conversations and thoughts about sort of the lessons learned from this and how we can implement it. And I think what would be of most value from something like this is it's not just the efficacy part, but the how we sell it economically, because going back to what you just said about, the challenges being getting these builders that are just in there to put in a bunch of houses in the grid and get out. That's our pretty much day in and day out what we're dealing with in terms of companies coming in. And the reality is we're at this point, unless the class action lawsuit on Senate Bill 150 is successful, I'm moving forward under the assumption that we're not going to get to update ordinances or codes. I mean, because this is just becoming our reality since basically 2023, these moratoriums, and we keep getting hit with storms on such a frequent basis that those moratoriums are just going to keep resetting. So we're thinking now on what is of our incentive-based structure to try to get through the things that we want to get through and get done in ways that we want to get done. And so what I would love to do is have conversations with folks like you and whatnot on how we can come up with incentivizations or arguments in terms of profitability that would push or guide some of these developers towards this sort of design. So basically going the carrot approach, since we don't have, chances are we may not have the stick. That's the one thing that I look here, because I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that part of what helped make this happen is that originally the owner and developer, there was this philosophy from the beginning, right, about how this should be designed to be more in harmony with nature, the surrounding natural areas and whatnot. And so if you've got somebody coming in and that's their mindset from the beginning, you've won. But if you don't, right?
It's very difficult.
Right, right. So really, to me, I think the challenge and most valuable thing would be to kind of figure out these game plans for how do you sell this. Okay, so if you can't have the same density of homes in your area by doing this, then what can we do with those homes that would, or how do we sell it in a way that the homes will have increased value and therefore you'll make your money back through that means, or something else that we can also do to help incentivize. Like we've been talking about, this just came up in one of the meetings we were having about at its simplest, doing horse trading with how they're going to do their structure design, give them more density if they keep to very specific narrow areas to allow for those flow paths and whatnot to go forth rather than do the grid. So, you know, stuff like that, but there's surely, as someone who is not a planner, I'm sure there are things that I'm not aware of, or tactics or whatnot that we could think of or consider. And so that's the kind of thing with folks like you and others that are kind of working towards this. Would be great to have those kind of real spaghetti on the wall sort of conversations about like how can we, based on your interactions with these developers, you know.
I mean, I have a lot of ideas. I'll share briefly, but I agree we should probably talk more. But I will share a couple of things that we've done that I think have been beneficial, because I think everybody will benefit from hearing it. Like with Winter Haven, for example, we did a planning study with Winter Haven that was to assist, and they got grants from the state and everything for it to cover it. It was to assist with the flooding issue that they had and everything. And so we came up with a full comprehensive design, very similar to what was done at Babcock, and said, you have a bunch of land over here. Here's how we think your land should be utilized. This was all zoned residential and everything else. And then we went ahead and we took it to the next step and was like, well, we know this is all zoned residential and it will be purchased for residential uses. But we'll be nice and we'll go ahead and we'll conceptually permit everything for you. So you have a conceptual permit on it if you want to sign on. And then you don't even have to go through the engineer. Like, it's simple at that point, right? And like all of the builders were like, this sounds great. My engineering's paid for. And the city's just like, well, that works nicely. And all of those ponds then got included into that overall system. We were able to take care of flooding issues that they were having, because it was all getting piped through that exact same system. But they have this conceptual permit now, and the builders are all happy because, well, I can just go in and build straight to this. I don't have to pay engineering nearly as much. How is it done? Everything's great. So we were able to use the carrot in that way. You also have, which is a little bit more interesting, I think, you have the new rules and everything with the water quality credit trading, and I think you can probably utilize some of that to incentivize. I had worked previously with the city of Fort Myers. It was specific to water quality credit trading, but then they were able to kind of offer those credits as a trade for increased density in this area. And so that was kind of laid out on where those credits could be applied intentionally. And anything you do with flood resiliency, you're going to be able to get some water quality credits out of it, because there's no way you can't be using it to store water and hold it back a little bit more, allowed to get a little bit more treatment. So they would go hand in hand.
Just curious, from your experience, on average, how much more land resources would you say you need for this comprehensive approach compared to the standard, you know, minimal or maximizing profit type of approach that we see quite often?
I don't know necessarily overall. I can't actually fully answer that question. We try to squeeze it in. So all of our calculations are done as if it were a traditional development. So when we say that everything was designed to the standard 14 inches, that is 100-year rainfall event in the area, that is what we designed it to, but that's not what actually got built. We've done our calculations on it, and I think the lowest 1 foot below finished floor elevation, the lowest elevation or the lowest amount of rainfall it can take is about 17.5 inches, so about 3.5 extra inches. The average across the site is about 21 inches of rainfall that it can take. So it's still over conservative. So we designed naturally, and then we were like, oh, well, we still have the soccer field over here, squeeze this in over here. Or we have the ability to turn this road this way. Let's go ahead and add additional storage and landscaping here. And anytime a landscape architect, and this is why the collaboration is so important, would come up with something, we would be like, oh, let's squeeze in a little bit of extra over there. Like our roads, you'll see sometimes we have bioswales in the middle. The roads don't drain to the bioswales. The bioswales are only there if the inlets back up, so then it has somewhere to go and a secondary way to get out. Which also allows the landscape architects to do whatever they want to do with their plantings and stuff, because those areas just don't get water to them otherwise. And if we end up getting a tree's feet too wet for 3 days because the inlet's backed up, I don't think the trees are going to care that much for 3 days. So, and if we lose a few trees during that time, so we try to squeeze it in, is really what we're doing overall. And that we do have the big waterways that we've preserved. And I am a firm believer that any of those natural waterways need to be preserved, including all of the wetlands that are adjacent to them, because that's part of a living, breathing system. But overall, if you have uplands, I think you can squeeze it in. It's just a different thought process and a very collaborative thought process to get it squeezed in.
You mentioned that we had 3 100-year events recently. This is just a general question. So has there been talk about converting the 100-year events to more like a 10-year event? And can we plan for that? I mean, it seems crazy that we're still saying like we're getting 100-year events.
It's so crazy. So this is opinion, but I have studied it in detail. So the term 100-year event was identified by a hydrologist, engineering books and everything years and years ago, like way long ago. And the way that you calculate the return period for a 100-year event, which there's all different types of statistics and everything, right? But there is a specific calculation that they tell engineers, this is how you calculate a return interval. It's statistics based, but it is one way that you calculate it. And the way that is it takes every single individual rainfall and says, here's my data pool, what's the likelihood of occurrence? What's throwing that off, in the research I've done by myself because I'm a nerd, is data has gotten better. So we're picking up 0.01 inch rainfall events, like we got 0.01 inches today. It's probably just humidity, but we're picking up teeny tiny rainfall events that are so tiny that when you put those into the whole data pool, it mutes out these events that are now bigger because they weren't in there before. And so now you're looking at, back in the 40s when the minimum rainfall event was 0.2 inches, and that's how much it took to tip a bucket on the tipping bucket. And you saw that you had rain 102 days a year. Now you're having rain in Florida 240 days a year. So you've just muted out the likelihood of that occurrence over that time period. If you go and you pull out pretty much everything under an inch from forever, you do see a direct trend up. But that's not how they tell you to calculate a 100-year event. So it's kind of a misnomer. I think Carolina kind of hit on it a little bit with, well, we're only going to look at wet season, but you're seeing it even in wet season because we have so many 0.1 or 0.01 rainfall events during wet season. So yes, I think we need to be designing for something higher, especially our roadways. I can't tell you what that is though. It's hard, it's a balance because people want to build and they don't want to pay a lot to raise it, but they also don't want to have to pay when they lose their home either, so.
I'm just curious. Definitely not my expertise, but it seems like we're in these crazy times where we're getting these 100-year events a lot. And it's like, what does that mean?
I 100% agree with, we need to do better. And I don't know, it's that push and pull against development and what's cheaper for development and progress in the economy versus, is it really better for the economy to let them develop at this standard because we're just gonna have to pay for it in the future. Anybody else?
We have time, so we are actually ahead of schedule. So feel free.
I do talk very fast.
I mean, I think that, your presentation was so helpful because, yeah, I mean, even though that video is very compelling with it's beautifully done and it's very interesting. It doesn't really go into the specifics like your presentation did on like what you all are doing differently than a traditional development with wet detention pond systems, you know, and so I think that's really helpful. And then the ideas of strategies like Brandon brought up of, you know, how do we incentivize this better, because we don't have a lot of people opting for this at this time.
Get insurance on board. That is my.
Mhm.
And I think that will be too, so I know at Babcock, we're actually working on, I live at Babcock too. We're actually working on developing our own zip code because insurance goes by zip code. And
Interesting.
no offense to Punta Gorda, but they did not fare as well as Babcock did. So I do not have a good insurance rate at all. It is not cheap to live in a storm-safe community. So we're working on our own zip code, and I think that will kind of also help push it forward. Because as you see those rates then come down once we get our own zip code, it will be like, why are we being stupid anymore? And I think that also, even for insurance agencies and stuff, is going to make more of a compelling argument. Like, you need to start pushing this, like, as opposed to saying it's zip code wide. I mean, there's people in my zip code that literally are on the coast. I mean, it's apples and oranges. So I think that's definitely part that needs to change as well.
And that's part of the conversation then about how you, because again, it's not, ostensibly the developer's not gonna care about that, because they're gonna build their house and whatever. But if there's a way to use that as a mechanism to promote the developer to build in this manner, that they can then market it, right, and sell, then so be it. And I think that I was very pessimistic about any sort of carrot working at all until about 6 months ago, when the housing market around here started because of the storms that we've been having. And now that houses are staying on the market longer, people are being choosier. That's kind of the golden opportunity to start kind of working with these developers to do these incentivization things. Like, hey, you've already bought these, you know, 80, 200, whatever acre tracts of land because you thought you were about to hit a gold mine and throw up a bunch of, you know, cracker boxes and sell them for $400,000. Guess what? So, so I think now's the time to kind of strike this stuff. And I think that, and I believe, just in my experience, my time, working with a lot of these local government planners in my county and elsewhere, that there is a lot of internal desire to kind of see stuff like this, but they are hamstrung by what the codes allow them to do and enforce, and what they can horse trade with the developer. In some cases, they might not know how to horse trade. Some people are just naturally better than others, or, you know, willing to put more of the effort than others. And so being able to kind of put together some kind of mechanism, cheat sheets, methods, or something that we can then, you know, hand the permitting side to say, look at this, look at this, look at this, and see if they're willing to jump for this or this or this idea. If we give them this incentivization, you know, if we give them a little bit extra TDUs, or we, you know, adjust their impact fees a little bit, which, but I didn't say that, don't work like that. You know, to kind of push forward, you know, incentivizing implementing designs, I think it's going to be key. So hopefully the housing market will kind of stay at a point that we'll have that ability to be able to have that kind of conversation.
I mean, I will say to your point, I think I have seen a slowdown everywhere except Babcock. Like, we're not selling any slower than we used to. Because I go back, I do the right-of-way inspections for Charlotte County too, so I can tell you I'm turning over the same number of houses as we were. It's just not slowing down because people are like, well, I want to live in Florida. They keep showing all of these floods and everything all the time, so I'll just go live here and it's safe. So it is an incentive to get people in. Like, if people want to live in Florida anyway and are tired of living in New York or wherever they're coming from, it's giving them somewhere at least that they feel like it's a benefit to them to move to.
Right.
What about, I mean, this is new development. So what about opportunities for retrofitting already existing communities? Because I think that's obviously going to be an issue.
Tons. So Like with the city of Fort Myers example, that was a relatively new road, but I would say anytime roads are getting repaved, you can start to look at where is an opportunity, even if we offshoot it to a park, but let's regrade it. So if everything backs up, we're using it as a canal essentially to get water to elsewhere, understanding that it's going to back up. Any parks that are getting revitalized. I think there's a huge opportunity for municipalities especially to start working with each other and other groups. And for the longest time, I've been harping on it for years. I'm like, no, like the ecologists need to work with the parks department, needs to work with the stormwater department, and then talk to the transportation department. And everyone's like, they have their own money. And I finally started to get a lot more municipalities, because I'll be like, well, look, they have this budget for this park, and it's right next to your road that you have budgeted for in 3 years. If you do them together, it's gonna cost you half as much money, and then you have more for something else. And so it's getting them to come together to understand that. But that goes back to that multidisciplinary. There is so much you can do, especially if you're already going to regrade the road or you're already going to revitalize a park. There's tons of storage we can put in parks. So much storage. And like I said, I'm putting it in an amphitheater. It's overflow. Nobody's going to call me and tell me that the seats in the amphitheater are flooded after hurricane. There's not. And then they're going to be like, look at how great our design was. It saved all of these residents because the amphitheater flooded. I mean, it's a no-brainer, but you have to get the stormwater people to agree, okay, we'll fund a portion of it, and the parks people to be like, well, we were going to do it anyway, so let's get the two working together. And it's trying to make sure that you're capitalizing on those, but the opportunities are absolutely endless. I found that every time I look through CIPs, I'm like, oh, just marry these together, and that's what you need to do. I would love to see like departments in all municipalities to just like a single department. Like my job is to go through this and figure out how these can fit together so I can reduce what we're spending on a single project and really capitalize and make the whole thing better for everyone. But they're just so, it's my budget and I don't know how to talk to the other person. So I've just started doing it myself. Like I'll talk to y'all, like you need this and you need this and you two need to talk to each other.
No, excellent point about the existing communities. I think that's good information that, to hear, not just the new development, but that there's opportunities.
Tons of opportunities,
Yeah.
so many. If anybody has anything coming up, like I'd love to talk to you. I like to, they always used to make fun of me in the office. Like they would say they would start to plan something on any particular project, the transportation group or whatever. And I would walk in and be like, oh, but you think of these 12 other things, and we have to start over a project. So I would love to make you start over a project if you have a good one that you think would be the opportunity.
So are you on a long-term contract with, just out of curiosity about how this works, sort of management over time, and you're the sole person making decisions for how water is moved around through the system, and how do you interact with the community?
It doesn't have an end date. It's just an in perpetuity contract that I have right now. I deal with, so there's an operations team out at Babcock. I do most of the design and everything too. That's separate. That's all contracted individually. But there's operation teams that is on the Babcock side of things. Tyler Kitson and Bill Vandermeer run that side of it. And they have a whole public works type team. I help inform all of the decisions, and then we have other stormwater teams that will help inform me. We send weekly updates to the ops team of here's the status of everything. Everything is up and functional. Everything is running. We don't anticipate anything big. I would say I sent it from the parking lot here because it goes out on Friday, so everyone can sleep well over the weekend. So I actually sent it from the parking lot here, and it does look like that Invest 91L is tipping south a little bit more. For example, for this one, we said not a big deal. It could be a bigger deal by next week. So if into our next week's reporting, it does look like it's continued to track south and potentially go up through the Caribbean. we will at that time call the whole team together and I'll lead that team meeting and be like, do we need to make any changes? Do we need to move the water? But we communicate once a week, just via a newsletter that I put out. Very quick little, here's how much rain we had last week, here's the nominal water level, here's how much it rose and came down in that amount of time, here's how much rain we're anticipating next week, here's a look at the tropics. That's what goes through our little weekly newsletter. And then we just need to discuss it once a week. So then we're all on the same page. So if I do have to push a button, like at least we talked about it first. Anything else? Oh, and the ops team also will communicate with the community and the residents if we determine only to. But that will all come out of that meeting. Like, okay, when do we start communicating?